Hello, this is Dr. Tim Harris, and I'm here at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Religion and Philosophy, also known as my back bedroom that I've turned into an office. I'm joined here today by the Dean of the Institute, Emma the Airedale. Today we're looking at the influence of Greek society and Greek thought on the New Testament. It was very influential on the world that Jesus was born into, moved around in, and the world that Christianity would eventually begin to overtake and conquer. Now, to understand the Greek influence, really you go back and you start to think about Alexander the Great. Now, Alexander wasn't always great. At one time he was just the young son of Philip of Macedonia, who then died either by disease or, many people believe, by poisoning from his wife. Now, Alexander becomes the king or the prince of Macedonia. He begins to conquer all of Greece. Eventually, he goes on and conquers what was known as the known world, or the civilized world. Actually, it stretched from Egypt on into Greece, into that part of the world, eastward toward the Persian, what we would know of as the Middle East, stretching all the way into India. Now, Alexander is important because he was taught. His teacher was Aristotle, the great philosopher, and Aristotle taught Alexander that there is purpose in life, and Alexander began to understand that his purpose was not only to be a great military leader, but to bring the Greek world to all the rest of the world, the love for philosophy and art and many of the other things that we know of in the Greek world. Alexander dies, and then he splits his kingdom up among his 4 generals, who then begin to put Hellenization or Greek culture into these different areas. And so what we see is as the world becomes more and more Greek, we see the world starting to embrace certain Greek factors. For instance, philosophy. The 3 great early philosophers were Socrates, one of my favorite gentlemen of history. Plato was not his real name, that was actually his wrestling name, sort of like Hulk Hogan is Terry Bolano's wrestling name. Plato means broad shoulders. And then Plato's student, Aristotle, becomes the teacher of Alexander the Great. Greek philosophy begins to make its way throughout the world and begins to influence the way people think. For instance, Plato's idea of universals, of that this world only gives us representations of what is truly universal, or what something is in its perfect state. And then, of course, Aristotle, teaching us that all things have purpose, or teleos, in their creation. So these things begin to influence the world. There are some other Greek influences that are still around, very strong in the 1st century when Jesus comes on the scene. And we particularly see these as the Apostle Paul confronts these and quite often is invited in to give his philosophy alongside Stoic and other philosophers. There is Stoicism. Stoicism was founded by Zeno. It believes that Logos is a divine principle. And remember, Jesus is referred to as the Logos, the Word. And so as Christianity began to go out and they used this term, Jesus as the Word of God, the representation of God, the Greeks sort of got that. They sort of connected with that. They had a tremendous influence in the world. One of the great Roman Caesars, Marcus Aurelius, the Caesar in the movie Gladiator, was a Stoic and wrote Stoic philosophy much of his life. And so we see how Stoicism influences the world. And then also Epicureanism. Now, Epicurus believed that people should be free to advance themselves through their desires and their feelings, their passions and all. Now, quite often we think this means that Epicurus believes that eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. And that's not quite what Epicurus taught. But he believed all things were broken down into what he called atoms. And these atoms control the world. And interestingly, that's why we use the term atoms today for this, what we thought at one time was the smallest thing. Now we know that there are things even smaller, even more atomized than atoms. Okay. Now, this atomization and materializing the world has a profound impact. Materialists, and we still have materialists today, they make up a good bit of our culture, believe that the only things that really matter are material things. For instance, sexual desires, pleasing the passions, all of these kind of things, and also obtaining material things. All of this is what really matters, and this really comes out of Epicurus philosophy. Now, finally, there is cynicism. Cynicism comes from Diogenes. Diogenes still lives with us today. If you have ever seen anyone give someone the Diogenes salute, that is goes back to his time when he would point at people with his middle finger, because that was a way of being disrespectful in those times. And so he did that, and people still do it today. And that's sort of where Diogenes still has some influence today. The cynics come from the term dog, because Diogenes thought that people should be absolutely free. There should be no hindrances on people's lives. So therefore, he said we should live as dogs and act as dogs in our relationship. He opposed any type of law, any type of cultural norms, any type of societal restrictions, and we still see this living today in what is known as, by a couple of terms, but probably we know them by anarchists. Anarchists still are very strong today. In fact, we see them in many things, many of the social upheavals in our world and even in our country today, anarchists. Now, most of us are familiar with Greek religion. They believed that the great gods lived upon Olympus. They were polytheistic. They believed in many gods. Zeus was the greatest of all the gods. And this actually was starting to take a hit from Socrates and other philosophers, because as they began to develop a new way of thinking called logic, it became apparent to them that there can't be more than one God. It's an illogical statement. But still, as a whole, the Greek people believed in these many gods. The two gods that become very important, Asclepius is a god of the great healing arts, and we see him worshipped all throughout the Greek world, as the Christians would go about talking about Jesus as the great healer, how he healed people from their afflictions. And in the book of Acts, we see that these things followed Paul as well. You can understand why Greek-speaking and Greek-thinking people open themselves up to the thought of Christianity. Another one is Dionysus, who was the god of wine. He could turn water into wine. Remember, the first miracle of Jesus was turning water into wine. Also, Diogenes died and would rise again. Now, these are not direct parallels, as some people try to make them to be, into the life of Jesus. But you can understand how Greek-thinking people allowed themselves to listen to and try to understand Christianity from these points of view, because they were similar to them. So we see that Christianity eventually begins to dominate Greek society. It fits sort of hand in glove. And so the Greek people are drawn to Christianity, and eventually they embrace it. So this is our lecture for this week, The Great Greeks. You'll have a quiz on Wednesday, and again, an assignment on Friday. Hope you have a great week. Bye.